Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday chat today is lots of bits really, but the main orchid subject is chatting about the Oncidium Alliance and why some grow like weeds and some don't, and some are easy and some aren't, because they're not all the same. Far from it. Right, news. Mum's still with us, getting weaker all the time, but still hanging on, still not eating. Still not good. I've got a show coming up this Saturday, which is the Bournemouth Orchid Society show. Hannah's not coming to this one because it was so close to the last one, and she's got things to do for a few weekends, so I'll be going on my own, which means I can go early and help set up and do stuff, because unfortunately I have the task of getting photos of everything to go in the magazine, and I'm obliged, although I could just say no, I'm not doing it, that anything that gets an award will have a rosette or a ticket on it to say, you know, first in class or something like that, and I have to wait for those to be put on the plants to take the pictures of that plant, which means I'm following the judges round waiting for them to put the stickers on, which is right at the end of the judging, just before the public come in. So I'm always under pressure to do that job. I've always said that if I don't get all the photos done, I'll get them done while the public are there, because there's always a quiet spell now and again, and there's always the excuse me, or worse still, oi, get out the way, press. But anyway, so I've got that job to do. I might put a plant or two in, I haven't made up my mind yet. Other things coming up this week, part 3 of the Project Orchids video will be done. That's the Cattleya types, that will be done early to midweek, possibly Tuesday. I might get it. I may well film it on Monday, but a lot of it will depend on what's going on out here. We are getting into autumn now. We are. Rumour has it we might get some rain. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. It started to rain this morning and then it stopped. It was that sort of rain that you have to run about to get wet, like, you know, waste of flipping time. We haven't had any serious rain for a long time, which means I have to water things in the garden. They should be getting watered naturally coming into autumn like we are. We are day lengths heading down fast. We're about to hit the autumn equinox, which is quite honestly, it's nothing special, but it's the rate of change at its maximum. So the amount that the days are getting shorter is at its maximum rate at the autumn equinox, and several days either side. All the equinox really is an excuse for the hippies to go and gather round the stone circles and stuff, getting all dirty and smelly. I got some soap for that. Yay! Anyway, so day length's getting shorter at a dramatic rate. You're looking at around half an hour a week, you know, which over a month is a lot. And getting into October, it's going to drop dramatically. And once we get down below the magic 11 hours, growth is going to slow quite dramatically. And it will slow even faster if we get dull weather, which we may well do. This is the UK after all, and other countries. Right, so that's what's going on. I've got some new blooms, including a first ever in this grow room, up above my head. My little Mr. Sidii, Orangus Mr. Sidii, is opening. These are not fully open. Now these are not large blooms, and I suspect on a very mature large plant, certainly the bloom spike would be far, far larger. You're looking at a dozen blooms on a mature plant, not just 4. That's if all of them open. But nonetheless, I owned a Mr. Sidii for some considerable time and it never bloomed. It was getting the right conditions. Mr. Sidii out of the Orangus is one of the higher light ones. Yeah? So it was getting the right conditions, but it never bloomed, and then it died. Whereas this one is a young plant. This is not a large plant. This is quite small. So to bloom at this age and size, I'm quite pleased. I don't know how close I can get with these because they're waggling around. It's a waggly spike. But they're delicate. They're a greeny creamy colour, they will, and that colour is more pronounced on the back of the blooms. Typical Orangus with the long spur, yeah. Night pollinated by moths with a long tongue that hunt for nectar down the spur. Fragrant at night as a consequence. And if you are a bloom that is night fragrant, it's a bit of a waste of time putting all your energy into big bright stripy colours, isn't it? Because you're not going to see them at night. So most of the things that are night fragrant and night pollinated tend to be very pale colours. So at least there's a hint of where the blooms are in the dark. Because you have to bear in mind we as humans very rarely experience dark. You've got to go and find it. It's not around. It's not in your garden. It's not out in the street. It's not dark in a town or even a village. It's not dark. You've got to get a long way from civilization. And when you're doing jungle stuff, yeah, you get dark. You get extra dark because the ambient night light, which a lot of people don't appreciate, a moonless night is still not dark. It's not pitch black dark like in the depths of a cave. It's not dark. But you put the tree cover out on a moonless night and it's pretty dark down below. Stumbling around type dark. Well, for most people anyway. So anyway, that's a first time bloomer for me. Young plant. One of the other Orangus has also got buds forming. Just we'll have a look at it. These are so tiny, you're not going to see much. This is the one with the long name. I haven't got a tag, I'm not going to try and remember it. But it has got a little tiny spike. And the problem with this is, the blooms are very attractive in pictures. What the pictures don't show you is how small they are. And I cannot see that these blooms are going to be large. Again, this is a cluster of young plants. So I would think on a more mature plant, perhaps the spikes may be larger and blooms may be bigger. Possibly, unknown. But that one's on its way as well. It's something that not a lot of people know. In my book about Orangus, sort of like my encyclopedia really, because it's got every species in it and a few hybrids. There's one thing it says in the generalisations at the beginning that's worth knowing, is many Orangus are short-lived. So when you've had one quite a few years and it suddenly dies, that may be a natural trait and it's not you. Now with mine, when I lost my three, that wasn't a natural trait. That was ripping them off their mount because it was rotting in all three cases and remounting it, and they just keeled over. They didn't have the strength to keep going. They lost a lot of their roots. So yeah, mine wasn't a natural occurrence, but some of them are short-lived. And it also emphasises the fact that the hybrids are worse offenders. Right, what else? We've got a cattleya somewhere hiding. Well, not that you could hide this, but somebody said they don't remember ever seeing this cattleya before, because I put a picture on the Facebook group. I haven't posted anything on Facebook for ages. Quite honestly, that Facebook group just sorts itself out. All I need to do is authorise the posts and accept or reject new member requests. That's all I do, a couple of times a day if I'm around. And it just, everybody seems happy to talk amongst themselves, put their pictures up, post their problems, get their answers most of the time. It just works on its own, and I'm quite pleased. But, you know, as the owner of the Facebook group, I ought to post a picture now and again, didn't I? And say hello, how are you? So I did that, and this was one of them. And somebody said they don't ever remember seeing this. This came from the Welsh study group show when I went with Lynn and Christine Trinder, and that would have been 2019, September time then. And it actually came from Speciotic Plants, because that's one of the shows they actually attend, so you can actually go and meet them. Nice couple. And that's where it came from. It was in bloom at the time, and it has bloomed once since. It's now in a bit of a state because of the treatment, and the base of this plant is covered in scale. Now this one didn't get treated when I did the first set with the hippie soap concoction. The reason being it's in bloom and it will be difficult to do the whole plant without splatting those blooms, which would probably not do them any good. It's quite badly desiccated, lost most of its roots, but it does have a single new growth over here and this effective new growth here, which has decided to bloom, which I was very surprised about, but it's only got 2 blooms. Now that's weak. You know, that normally has a cluster of 5 plus. It's only got 2, but 2's better than none. Anyway, gorgeous colour and a little bit unusual. Oh, then all you Cattleya growers, why is that colour unusual? There's something missing. Yeah, nearly all of the purple and pinky Cattleyas have got yellow in the middle, and this one hasn't. Not a sign of any yellow anywhere. That is the most gorgeous, the camera's not going to reflect that colour properly, but that lip is the most gorgeous royal purple. Absolutely stunning colour. So, there's that one. Oh, that is bad, that scale. Still, I will be getting at that in the next day or two. As I said, I need a nice day, you know, when I'm almost guaranteed to get some heat in here, get the fans on full blast, and next time I do the hippie soap treatment I'll be doing a lot all in one go, because the sample plants have all survived bar one, which was actually dying anyway, so that was not the treatment. That one just had something fundamentally wrong with it, and I've taken it out of the grow room in case it's, you know, catching or sharing water could spread something nasty. There's something wrong with the plant, it just won't grow. And the new growths keep pushing out their leaves and then the leaves die. That's not natural for a Dendrobium, not at all. So there's something wrong with that one. So it's out. No other new blooms anywhere. No. So at this time of year it's more about blooms disappearing rather than appearing. Even the Masdevallia's dropped its only bloom, so that one's gone now. But no Masdevallia's out. No Dracula's out. Dracula, only got one really. Yes, there's not much going on as far as... There are some spikes starting. There's a intergeneric down there that the label said Cambria. That's got a nice spike coming. That has gorgeous blooms on it. So there's a few Oncidium types that are either in bud, and I'm pretty sure, I can't get at it because it's right in the very back corner where it gets light from both sides, is my Francis Fox. And I'm pretty sure that's got a spike. Now that will be nice, because apparently they're not the easiest to get to bloom because of the high light requirement. So even in the Cattleya range, you get an apple blossom, you get too much light on that, it'll burn. And then you get Francis Fox, another Cattleya type, it doesn't get enough light, it won't bloom. So there's quite a bit there. You know, some of the Lalias, high light plants, very high light plants, up near the Vanda sort of range, if not in it. So anyway, that's that. I got my big mug out today, so that hopefully the coffee will stay hot. Yeah. That other mug's quite a little one, but it was a present from Hannah, so you know, so I use it most of the time. But I thought we'll have a big one today, since it's normally a long video. Right, now what I wanted to talk about with the Oncidium Alliance is, I'll leave the intergenerics till last, so that when we get to them it'll make a bit more sense why they're not all the same. Now, in the Oncidium Alliance you've got a lot of different genera that actually stand alone in their own right. They are just allied to Oncidiums, like cousins, you could say. I don't think you could say any are distant uncles. They're not that far away, and they all have a basic look about them. They all follow a pattern in appearance, even though there are differences there. And I'll start with the Brassieres, the spider orchids. Now if you look at the requirements for most of those coming in from the species, because obviously there's quite a few hybrids around that are classed as Brassiere types. So now we're already getting away from, well, is it a Brassiere or isn't it? No, there's Brassiere types. Yeah? So they may have been hybridized with something else, so they're not a true Brassiere anymore. So we're getting into intergenerics already, but I just want to leave that a bit. So the Brassieres are up the high light end of the Oncidium Alliance. Almost across the board, but it's still worth checking an individual species. Now, if you've got an intergeneric, you're going to be stuffed to try and find out what it likes. It's not easy because most of them are unnamed for a start. If you've got a name, then you can find out what went into it and then find out the elements, care for the bits that have gone in. But you could be looking at 4 or 5 different types of orchid that's gone into that one. What are you going to do? Guess, basically. So at the higher end, the Brassieres, they have serious growth periods when they are actively growing. They grow vigorously. And when you get an orchid that's growing almost visibly, you know, you come in the next day and you think, crikey, that new growth's pushing on, or new growths. When they're doing that, they drink and feed. Yeah. Now, none of the Oncidium Alliance are high feeders. They like small, regular amounts. So not high food, but constant when they're in growth. And Brassieres will have a period under normal circumstances where they put up their new growths, they push them on hard, new roots come out somewhere down the line, not normally when the new growths start, normally a bit later on, but they'll come with those new growths, whole new set of roots. If they remain undisturbed on their mount or in their pot, because they're quite happy in either, on, in, then the old roots don't deteriorate unless the media does. So if your old roots deteriorate on a Brassiere, it's your fault. Or if you've only recently got it, it was somebody else's, but you're now stuck with it. So they can lose their older roots, normally if they're disturbed. But if you time it again with the new roots that are either about to come or just starting, then you've got a new set to replace the older ones if they don't make it. And the chances are some will and some won't. It'll be like that. Yeah, some will, some won't. So, and for me, the Brassieres typify a lot of the Oncidium Alliance, with that one exception that they like bright light. Now, I wouldn't say as bright as Cattleya, but some of them will put up with that, as long as it's not direct midday sun type stuff. You know, so east or west window, if you're growing them indoors. You can grow a Brassiere in the house. Most people probably wouldn't because of their sheer size, because they're up the big end, and so are their spikes. You know, you are looking at very long arching spikes, and they don't look right stuck up like that. They really don't look right. That's how they should grow, arching out over. Yeah. And if you've got a couple and they go in different directions and they're a metre long, that plant's going to take up 2 metres from side to side. They get big. And that might be a reason that in your case you do want the spikes to get staked up right, because you haven't got room for them to arch over. But they do look better like that. So that's one type. And then I'm going to do the opposite now, and that's why I want to just say that these different genera within this alliance can be very different. So we go from the Brassiere to Miltoniopsis. They're still in the alliance. If you go back far enough, they were all called Miltonias once, and then that small set, because it is a small set, I think, at the time they were reclassified and given their own genus, I think there were 6 in the wild. I think there's now only 5. One's been declared extinct. It's not been found in the wild for whatever the length of time is. But now we're looking at low light. Too much light for these puts them under stress. Now, one that's in tip-top condition with a really impressive root system, yeah, might take a bit more light than some of the others. But quite honestly, it's difficult to get a Miltoniopsis in tip-top condition, because they're, I won't say they're fragile, because you know they're grown properly in the right conditions. They're not fragile at all. They're fussy. And to me, they are the most fussy because they react badly to any form of stress. And the sort of stress that will get a Miltonia is too much light, too little light, too warm, too cold, too much airflow, called a draft, yeah, not enough water, too much feed, I won't say not enough feed because they don't need much at all. So you put all those together, they're all a form of stress. And if you put a Miltoniopsis in more than one of them, it's not going to fare well. They're just fussy. So now compare that with the Brassieres, easy going, brighter light, vigorous growers, you know, and will take water and feed when they're actively growing like that. You're looking at two almost totally different types of plants. And this is where we come into, okay, it is an Oncidium Alliance, but sometimes that alliance is a little vague. And although these may be in it, and having gone to Miltoniopsis, which to me are the most fussy, there are some traders, much to my annoyance, and I've taken two of them to task and they wouldn't back down because they bought the plants from a nursery. And that's what the nursery put on them, and they were selling them on, so they refused to change the name. But they were selling Miltonias as, they were selling Miltoniopsis as Miltonias. And that, quite honestly, is out of order, because a Miltoniopsis has a certain type of environmental care that it's fussy about. Miltonias haven't. That's the difference between them. Apart from a couple of letters on the end, the Miltonias aren't fussy. They're much easier to grow. So we'll move on to them next. These can be huge, they can be small. They have a great range of size in amongst the Miltonias. They have a general look about the blooms, and luckily I've got one out that typifies the normal shape of the bloom. This is a primary cross, so it's effectively two species. That typifies the shape of Miltonia blooms. So you've got an elongated lip with like a waistline halfway down, yeah? And for the size of the bloom, that's relatively large. They can be quite flat, but they've often got curly edges to their petals and sepals. And often, like this one, petals and sepals are a totally different colour to the lip. It's almost like it's off a different plant. That happens relatively frequently. So that's what the blooms, a typical bloom would look like. There are instances of varieties, obviously, but that's what they tend to look like. Dirty hands now. I've just watered all my mounts, they're all soaking wet. So Miltonias, good light, not as high as Brassieres, but good light. They're up that end, not the deep shady type stuff. They can turn into monsters. Monster. That sort of size plant, that's a big plant. You know, if you're growing in the home, the beauty of the Miltonias, pot grown like that, is that with a little bit of help, they don't need much, you can keep the spikes upright, and they actually look quite reasonable upright. Yeah? Right, you know, they don't naturally arch over. This one's not staked or held in any shape or form, and it's upright. And it's got 3 blooms on the top, so it's not as, you know, the weight of the blooms is up there. So they can grow big, and they will put out 1 or 2 new growths on an old growth, normally after the blooming's finished, so, or the period when it should have bloomed if it didn't. So yeah, they can get quite big. Have I got any other smaller ones around? I haven't got a huge number, but the 3 big ones are up there. Those are all Miltonias. One genuine species, Regnellii, and then these 2 purpley ones here. They're they're classed as Morelliana. That's the one I just held up, but it is actually a hybrid. It's not the true species, but nobody knows what the hell it's been crossed with. But it's definitely got a lot of Morelliana in it because of the shape and the colour. But whatever it was crossed with put a lot of vigour into that plant. But I'll just show you, it comes back, it gets its traits back every now and again, although this is a hybrid. And one of the ways that can distinguish is that under normal circumstances the species has rounded leaves at the tip, and these are obviously pointed. Well, not all of them are. Some of them have got rounded ends. Every now and again, it sort of puts one out that looks more like the species. Anyway, so some can grow large, and quite honestly, the species are medium to large, generally speaking, as a generalisation. So that's the Miltonias. So we've done Brassieres, Miltoniopsis, Miltonias. I suppose we could do Oncidiums in the Oncidium Alliance. They're the sort of centre, if you see what I mean. And in amongst the Oncidiums are miniatures to giants, warm growing to cool growing, and bright light to much lower light. But they're all Oncidiums. Yeah? The ones you've got to watch in the Oncidium Alliance are the reclassified Odontoglossums, which is, I still despise whoever thought that was a good idea, because it's not. The Odontoglossums have a look about them, their blooms have a look about them, so do their plants, and okay, they are Oncidium-like, but their care is not. They come into the lower light end of the light spectrum. Cool growers almost across the board, not all Oncidiums, in fact not many Oncidiums, true Oncidiums are cooler growers, most of them are intermediate, some head up into the warm end, but Odontoglossums are a different kettle of fish, and you could grow those very successfully with Masdevallias and Draculas. They would love that environment, they're that different. Yeah. Greatly used in hybridisation, Odontoglossums. So if you've got a Brassiere that's a third Odontoglossum, how are you going to look after that then? It primarily looks like a Brassiere, so it could be a primary Brassiere cross, then crossed with an Odont. And what that will do is reduce the length of the spidery bits, the petals and sepals, and introduce more colour than the basic Brassiere colour that you started out with, or colours that you started out with. So it can often reduce the size of the plant. It will often reduce the length of the spike. Unfortunately, it will often reduce the number of blooms as well. So you end up with something that's Brassiere-like, but it isn't. And what you've just done is introduce something that doesn't like high light and likes to be grown cool into a mix with Brassieres. You've just changed the care for that quite dramatically. And if you looked that up, you know, if it had a name, because if it was registered, and you saw, oh, Brassiere so-and-so, cross with Brassiere so-and-so, and then cross with Oncidium so-and-so, you wouldn't give it a second thought, would you? But if that Oncidium was once an Odontoglossum and it's lost that because of the reclassification, you've missed a chance to adjust your care. Not happy with that one. You mess about with lots of things, but that was not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. Quite honestly, the reclassification that I love because of what it did, and it does help greatly with care, is taking the Miltoniopsis out of the Miltonias and given them their own genus, because now you know these need different care. They come from a different part of the world, different environment altogether. So that's that. So in amongst the Oncidiums, you've got the full range, so you're going to have to look them up. And the Oncidiums and the reclassified Odontoglossums get crossed with many others, and this is where we can now come back into the intergenerics. And all that really means is more than one genus has been hybridized. That's all it means. It's not a flashy, it's a made-up name basically. It's not really a scientific term, I don't think. But you will get an awful lot of hybridization going on. They're looking for fragrance, they're looking for fullness of blooms, brighter dynamic colours. Just trying to get that mix, and every time you try a different thing, you're never quite sure what's going to come out the other end, and you get some absolute stunners come out the other end. And it's constant. It's going on all the time because a lot of those intergenerics are coming out from the mass producers. So what they get up to is they've got the crosses that have already worked. So they've got some of them as like stock plants, you could call them. And then they've got others, which could be species or other primary crosses or other intergenerics. And what they do is they look at the market and they look at what sold last year through the growing season, through the season when most people are out shopping in garden centres and stuff like that, where most of these are supermarkets. And what did they buy and what didn't they buy? And then they analyse that and they think, well, actually, that one that we produced that was a deep purple with that bright yellow centre, that rocketed off the shelves. So what can we do to make that better? So it had quite thin petals and sepals. Had a good lip with that bright yellow on it as well, that against the purple looked absolutely stunning, and the contrast of those two colours. So what could we do to make that better? Could we get more blooms on the spike? Right, what have we got that wouldn't mess those colours up to any extent, but has a lot more blooms on the spike? Have we got anything like that? And they'll have a look round. What else could we do? Perhaps we could make the petals and sepals fuller, so that it became a more rounded bloom rather than having the sepals and petals with big gaps between them. So more like a cattleya. Yeah? So as opposed to the Miltonia we just looked at, a cattleya has fuller petals and sepals. So the gaps aren't as big. Yeah? So that might be something that they think would be an improvement. The ones they produced weren't very vigorous. So perhaps we could try and keep it as near as damn it the same, but get some vigour into there. So what have we got that wouldn't mess the colours up, that grows like a weed? Whoosh, could we add some of that in? And sometimes they'll do it twice. So they'll cross it with something to get the vigour, yeah? And then they'll check what happens, how good are these, were they more vigorous, did it work? Right, now we'll go back to what we originally planned and sort the size of the bloom out and the number of the blooms. And this is going on all the time. And it's all geared up to market trend. The only problem you've got is the market trend, like let's say the market trend for 2021, this year, is such, and you want to improve on something that sold really well. How long before it hits the market out the other end, given the work you've got to do, yeah? And growing these little flask mericlones on and actually getting them to blooming size and having a look at the flower. And there are far, far, far more disappointments than successes. These people work hard sometimes for a waste of time, and the actual product, the product at the end is disappointing, and they don't think they're going to sell very well. Do you know what they do then? They chuck them in the skip because they can't spend time messing. Yeah. So, yeah, Oncidium types. Very worthwhile. More colours than you can shake a stick at. In fact, all colours. The only thing that there isn't naturally in the Oncidium Alliance, I believe, is blue. But then you could say that about most orchid genera. There isn't much true blue around. There are some, don't get me wrong. And there are some genuine true blues. But a lot of them that are called blue, and those that they've had cerulean put in their name, it's because they're nearer blue than the original. That's all it means. They're not blue. They're not real blue. I mean, I've got a Vanda that's going mad up there at the moment. That spike I was on about grows a couple of inches a day. I'm going to get that down actually. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I may have shown it, but. I've had to put clothes pegs on this to weigh it down so that it doesn't hit the roof. You'll see why in a minute when I get there. I have to go careful with this because the spike is actually weighed down. If I knock it, it could actually snap. This is my bigger Vanda. That's a root system. That's a root system. It's still growing, that one. And that's a spike. And as you can see, if that was upright, it would be there. And the top of the plant is that close to the roof. That's the brightest light I can get. And eventually I will have to extend the hook because the plant will touch the roof. But anyway, this had, you can just see the marks there. This had 4 clothes pegs on it when it was smaller, when it was about that big, to get it to curl over. Now that it's actually curled over, it will probably stay there on its own, but I'm just going to leave that on there to make sure it does. We're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, possibly 9 blooms on there, and those blooms are 3 inches across. They open about 2 inches across and then they grow. The actual blooms grow. So over a period of about a fortnight they get half as big again from when they first open. So that's a good Vanda, I'm pleased with that. Never managed to get 2 spikes at once on it. Although I have had 2 spikes in a season, but this didn't bloom last year at all. The year before it bloomed late and went on into the winter. It's a little bit earlier this time round. But we'll get to see those in, I don't know how long. But as I said, that spike I reckon grew between 1 inch and 2 inches a day for a while. And it's still growing. I mean, this is still going to extend. These buds have got to get a lot farther apart before the blooms open. Otherwise they'd all be squashed up together. So coming on, that one. Looking forward to seeing those again, because it missed a year. It seems a very, very long time ago since I've seen those blooms. I used to have a tessellated white Vanda with large blooms as well. And that went to somebody else because I haven't got room for that many highlight orchids. I mean, the Renantheras are up there with the Vanda, or 2 of them are, the other one's over there. Since they went in the, lava rock, they seem to be doing better. Not brilliant, but better. The top growth seems to have speeded up a bit, and some of the roots have branched. But those 2 up there are not the best ones. Come on, stop it. Stay. Keep sliding down the wire, it's like a slippery slope. This is the best one. The few spots on the leaves were bugs. They're gone now, long since gone. So this one in theory is blooming size. It hasn't, but I suspect it may well put a spike up next year. But this has grown a lot of roots since I got it. The root system has got a lot better. Now all of these get thrown in the Vanda bucket, so they get dunked. And they get left there sometimes as long as an hour to totally hydrate. So these roots seem reluctant to hydrate. They certainly don't hydrate if you spray them. They don't even show a hint of green. So these get a nice long soak. And obviously with the rocks in there, they've got something to grab hold of, should they choose to do so. And also the lava rock holds moisture. And no, it's not an Oncidium Alliance. It's a Vandaceous plant. Renantheras. There was there one? I think in the Devon Orchid Society show, I think there was a Renanthera in bloom. They tend to have very long branching spikes with vivid reds and orange type blooms. Nice if I ever see some in here. But highlight orchids again, I've only got so much highlight, and to start getting more highlight orchids I jeopardise the ones that are lower down, because obviously if I let more light in through the roof, double layer of shade netting on that roof at the moment, plus it's polycarbonate, which is opaque, not clear. So you know, during the summertime that sun absolutely beats down on that roof. And up this end there's only 1 layer of shade netting. That's where the Vandas and the Renantheras live. That one is over there simply because the light's changing and there's a lot of bright light coming in that end at the moment in the afternoon, so I'm trying it over there. Mainly because there isn't enough room up here. Too many. Right, back to Oncidiums then. The miniature Oncidiums that you can virtually guarantee, and there are quite a few named ones, are the twinkles. And that's mainly because one of the parents in the twinkles is a miniature. In fact, that was one of the ones that was repotted in the latest kitchen time. That was one of the parents of the twinkle. And the other parent is Sotoanum, which is a monster. So that therein, you know, somebody must have thought, you know, this Sotoanum, the fragrance is gorgeous, the spikes are quite large, it's quite a big plant. I wonder if we could get a smaller version. And so they picked on the other parent, which was a miniature, and really dwarfed them down. All the twinkles are small plants. You know, none of them grow into giants. So, oh, we got a spike on this one. I don't know what the hell this is. This came from Jeff's, and I said that I'll try it on a mount because it had a nice flat back to it, so it lent itself to sitting on a mount quite nicely. It's grown some new growths quite happily. It seems to be doing okay, and we do, I noticed this morning, have a spike. So we may find out what the hell it is, because I haven't got a clue. It didn't have a tag. It's obviously an Oncidium type, and look what I've just spotted. We do not like those. They eat our roots. That was on that plant. These are bush snails. They're tiny, and they breed between on a mount behind the plant, and that's where they stay. They don't come out very often. So, and they're a nuisance to say the least. That one's an ex-snail. It's not going anywhere. Don't see any dramatic damage on this plant, but then it could have been chewing the roots round the other side of the plant, not this side, because I mean the roots here are pretty good, but it may well be round there. Now I don't get those very often, but I've had them. One of those, one of my long cane Dendrobiums once had an outbreak of those round behind the moss and the root system, and it becomes noticeable. See, when the plant's just doing its thing and growing the canes, you don't notice the snails. You notice them most when your new set of roots start and you suddenly find the growing tips are missing. That'll be those little tykes. And that particular Dendrobium had a lot. I mean, I took the plant off, that got cleaned up. Hydrogen peroxide does those in. And basically the mount, to clean a mount, I just pour boiling water over it. Nothing can live through that, basically, so that does the job. And if I think there's a sign of snails in the crevices, it'll get a second load of boiling water as well. Anyway, I've got some Oncidiums that will not grow, and there's one here. And this is so annoying, I just cannot get this thing to take off. This was a big plant when I got it. The pseudo bulbs were like this sort of size. Beautiful, large, gorgeous blooms. It's got my name in its name. It's got a lot going for it, and it will not grow. That is this season. No new growths, no new roots. It's just been sitting there like that. It's done nothing. It just will not grow. And I don't know why. I tried it in different positions. It's been in a pot. It's been on a mount. I don't know what else to do with it, really. And I don't want to disturb it now because it's obviously on its last legs. So it's either going to rustle up enough energy to put a new growth out and hopefully some new roots, or it's not, in which case the leaves will drop and it'll just shrivel up and cease to be. But I'd never get that again, you know. It's hard enough getting it in the first place. There's a story there. Right. That'll do for today. As I said, I just wanted to point out that in the Oncidium Alliance, you've got quite a few genera. This is the start point of the Alliance, basically, the various genera that there are, like Brassieres, Oncidiums, Miltonias, Miltoniopsis. There's others, I haven't got them all. And then the intergenerics are when they start hybridizing. Now you will get hybrids that stick to a particular genus. You just then end up like with a Brassiere hybrid because there's only Brassiere in it. It's not an intergeneric. But you've only got to introduce one of the other genera and it becomes an intergeneric. And it might only be a slight one. You could have had two Brassieres, two species crossed to get a primary cross, crossed with a different Brassiere hybrid or a different Brassiere species, then crossed with an Odontoglossum. So there's not much of the Odontoglossum in it, but it'll affect its care. So there you go. I think what I'll do now is I'm going to go through, I've got a folder with all the orchids that I've lost over the years. Now some of those have gone to other people, some have been sold, and some have died. So there's a folder of everything that's ever bloomed for me that I no longer have, and it's a folder. And I think I'm going to end today, I'm going to put a bit of music on, and I'm just going to show you all the pictures of every Oncidium Alliance plant I've ever had, including the ones I've still got. Yeah? Just like a collage. They won't stay up there long, but it's just to show the variety of bloom sizes, colours, shapes, patterns and all that. And if it doesn't inspire you to at least have some Oncidiums, then we'll stick to your Phalaenopsis or stick to your Cattleyas, stick to your Vandas. But I can't imagine, I wouldn't have a collection without some Oncidium types. That's it for me. Anyway, thanks for watching, and don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, think about doing so. Do the old thumbs up, it all helps the channel be seen by YouTube as a growing channel. Because you start getting numbers that stagnate and YouTube stops promoting that, and you think, oh, that channel's not gonna be around much longer, we won't bother with it. So to keep it going, the subscriber number goes up, the thumbs up is a regular thing, not so much of the thumbs down, and all good stuff. And even the number of comments on a video can help the channel appear to be growing. Yeah, you can get a video with a hell of a lot of views and hardly any comments. In fact, some of the really large channels are in that boat, and some of that may be they don't get time to actually answer the comments, you know. But anyway, so think about doing that. And then you've got the Patreon site where you can become a patron. The next thing that goes on that site is this video with no ads. That's always a Sunday that goes up there for the patrons, so they get to watch this ad-free without, you know, without having to pay for an app to do it for them. Then there's the buy me a coffee thing, just a little treat, you know, that sort of thing. So that's what's going on. And I always forget to say, don't forget the merchandise, which is probably one of the better ways of supporting the channel, really, because at least you get something to put your coffee in or to wear, you know, or to carry your stuff around in. There's those tote bag things. So anyway, pictures and music coming up, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.